Hey, what's up guys? It's the new sensation, Big O Notation here, and today I'm going to be bringing you a deck profile on the third deck that I took to my recent Fight Night event, and this deck is going to be the Shadow Dragon Xeno archetype, or Syn Shenron Xeno, whatever you want to be calling it. And this is going to be primarily a mill deck like the other two decks that I took. For those that don't know, I took the Slug Mill deck and the Janemba Mill deck that I've recently profiled. I'll have links to those in the description as well if you're interested in either of those. If you're an avid mill fan like me, I'm sure you'll definitely be looking to check out how Janemba has been adapted to the recent format, or how Slug Mill plays out just as a very, very fun rogue deck. But anyways, I will get straight into the deck profile. I'll go, because this deck is relatively new, it came out about 2 weeks ago in set 14, I'll try and go over as many of the effects as I can. It might be a bit of a longer video just because of that. I'll be reading off a bunch of the effects so that people know what the deck can do properly. But this deck is really special to me because my favorite character or set of characters are Syn Shenron, or the Shadow Dragons, as you can probably tell from the mat. And I really enjoyed playing the yellow Syn Shenron deck, and my favorite playstyle of deck is a mill deck. So when it was announced that Syn Shenron was coming out with a mill deck, I was super excited. But I'll get straight into the leader. So the leader is the first leader to actually have blocker printed on his card text, and that's really nice for this deck. It just means you can protect your unison and protect your battle cards a little bit more, and that's really key for the deck because it's a spirit boost deck, as with a lot of the set 14 decks are, because that's when spirit boost was announced. And protecting your unison, keeping the markers high on your unison, is going to be really key for this deck. And blocker, just being able to tank one attack every turn for your unison, is really helpful for the deck. He has his first auto is when you activate a Shadow Dragon extra card from your hand, you and your opponent place the top card of your decks in the drop area, so you both mill one. So starting off on the front side, it's parallel mill, but when we get to the back side, it switches it up a little bit, and I'll get into that. His auto on swing is you discard a black Shadow Dragon card from your hand and then draw a card. And then at the end of the turn, you can switch this card to active mode. So that means you can still get your leader swing in and get the discard one, draw one, and then be able to block on your opponent's turn. That might seem like a pretty crap on-swing effect because you have to discard one to draw one, so you're not actually plussing. But I'll get into it later, but that discard is actually really helpful for the deck a lot of the time. His Awaken is when your life is at 4 or less, or if you have 7 or more black Shadow Dragon cards in your drop area. Notice how it says cards there, not battle cards or anything. A lot of your extra cards have text that means they're counted as Shadow Dragons. You can draw one card and then switch up to one of your energy to active mode, so that's really nice. Often getting to 7 Shadow Dragons in the drop area early on is really helpful, especially against aggro decks, because it just means you don't have to go down to 4 life before you awaken. On the backside, he retains the blocker skill, and then his 2 autos that were on the front side get changed a little bit. So his first auto, when you activate a Shadow Dragon extra card from your hand, only your opponent is milling this time. So the front side auto, meaning that you mill a card every time, is pretty helpful, just so that you can get a couple more Shadow Dragons in your drop area to help you awaken a little bit earlier. But then on the backside, it goes into just your opponent milling so that you don't mill out first. Then when he swings, he's just drawing a card, no discard this time, and then he gains plus 5k power, and at the end of the turn he switches back to active mode again. So the plus 5k is obviously really nice, so your opponent has to combo extra cards to get out of the swing. And then for the final effect on his backside, very reminiscent of the Mecha Freezer leader, is an activate main / battle once per turn for Spirit Boost 1. You can activate the activate main / battle skill on a Shadow Dragon extra card from your hand without paying its energy cost. So that's really strong. Obviously, Mecha Freezer was a really broken leader, and still probably is really even without U9 Assemble. And this is very similar to that effect. The only difference is you have to Spirit Boost, and so as with most of the decks in set 14, Spirit Boost is very common amongst those decks. And speaking of Spirit Boost, what is Spirit Boost without a unison? We have 4 of the Toa unison, This is obviously going to be really, really important for the deck because you want to be spirit boosting a lot to free play your extra cards. And when you free play your extra cards, your opponent mills a card. So it's going to be accelerating the win con of the deck really, really quickly. The Unison has 0 specified cost, so you just play it whenever you want to, as long as you tap at least 1 energy. And then 10k power, so it's pretty weak, but because your leader has blocker, you can tank hits for your Unison, so that's really helpful. And she also has an auto of when your leader activates a blocker skill, you mill one of your cards from your deck to the drop area, and then she gains a marker. So if you're activating blocker when your opponent swings at a Unison, you can effectively tank 2 hits, because you tank 1 from your blocker, and your Unison gains a marker, which can then tank another hit, which is really, really strong. Plus, the fact that you have to mill a card is helpful as well, because if you're unawakened, you want to be getting to 7 Shadow Dragons in the drop if possible. Her +1 is really nice. You draw a card, then you bottom deck 1 card from your hand and up to 3 Shadow Dragon extra cards from your drop area. The fact that you don't plus off of this activate main actually really sucks, but being able to just bottom deck your extra cards is really nice. It means that you can run much lower ratios on your extra cards without worrying about losing all of them, and it means that you're almost guaranteed to be the person that doesn't mill out fastest, because you're not going to draw through your entire deck whilst you're putting back cards like this. The -7 is almost entirely useless at the moment, but once we get more Shadow Dragon support, which we definitely will, because we're still missing Raid Shenron, Ice Shenron, Nuova Shenron, and Omega Shenron. So like with the Yellow Syn deck, we're definitely going to get more Black Syn stuff over the next 2 sets. But the -7, if your leader is a Shadow Dragon card, you choose up to 7 Black Shadow Dragon cards with different character names in your hand and or drop area and play them. Like I said, that's almost never going to come up. And even if you get to 7 markers on your Unison, you probably don't even use it most of the time, because you only have about 4 targets currently. I think you have Oceanus, Naturon, Haze, and Syn Shenron at the moment. So you're only going to be bringing out 4 cards, and some of the cards that you'll bring out will be completely useless, like a 5k blocker or a super combo or something. So the -7 is pretty useless, but once we get more Shadow Dragon support, it's going to be really, really threatening, and people are going to have to start dealing with your Unison a lot quicker. So for the actual Shadow Dragon engine, we have 4 of the 1-cost Haze Shenron. Almost all of the Shadow Dragons that we have in the deck have this auto of when they're discarded or played from your hand. If your leader is a Shadow Dragon card, you can check the top card of your deck, and if it's a Black Shadow Dragon card, then you add it to your hand, otherwise it's placed at the bottom of the deck. You only get this auto if the card is played from your hand or discarded by a Shadow Dragon skill. So you can trigger it off of your leader auto when it swings on the front side, which is why the leader auto on the front side is not necessarily a bad auto, because you can discard one of your black battle cards, one of your Black Shadow Dragon battle cards, and then draw a card from your leader, and then check the top card with the battle card auto, and hopefully it's a Shadow Dragon and you get it to hand. So I'll only go over specifically that auto if the Shadow Dragon that I'm going over doesn't have it, because almost all of the Black Shadow Dragon battle cards have that auto, so it's not worth me going over it every single time. But this specific Haze has an activate main once per turn for 1 specified black. If your leader is a Shadow Dragon card, you switch him to rest mode and you free play a Shadow Dragon that costs 3 or less. So we'll go over some of the better targets for that now. In my opinion, the best target for that is going to be 4 of the 3-drop Haze Shenron. All of the Shadow Dragons have 2 different battle cards and 1 extra card in their Xeno forms. So the bigger Haze Shenron is a critical blocker, and he has the same auto as all of the Shadow Dragons, and he has a second auto of when he attacks, you choose up to 1 of your opponent's battle cards and send it to its owner's warp, and then at the end of the turn he gets switched back to active mode. So you can swing 15k crit, warp 1 of their battle cards, and then you get a 15k blocker during your opponent's next turn, which is super strong. being able to drop this guy for 2 energy in combination with the Haze Shenron, and the fact that he replaces himself on play because of the Shadow Dragon auto, is really, really ridiculous. And that's why this guy's a 4 of, because if possible, you want to be playing this every time you can use the Haze Shenron skill. For the next targets for the Haze, I have 2 of the Naturon Shenron. This card is okay if you don't see the Haze Shenron, but realistically, it's nowhere near as good. He's a deflect blocker, so his best utility is going to be against blue to try and play around things like God Sealing or any of the other counterplays that they might be running, because they have to counterplay blind if you're playing them off the Haze Shenron skill. And then you can just drop this, and because it's deflect, it doesn't get hit. But he has an auto of when this card is played from your hand, choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards with an energy cost of 5 or less in their battle area or their drop area and place it under this card. So it can be decent removal, or it can take stuff out of the drop area like a Grey Ape Son Goku Saiyan Instincts, or it can take out like Ribriands and stuff, which is nice. So it has some good utility there. And then you get to choose up to one of the keyword skills on the card that you took, and he will gain that skill until the end of your opponent's next turn. The only issue that I have with this card is a lot of the time the keyword skills are going to be things like double strike, triple strike, critical, so things that you want to be attacking with to apply pressure with, but then you don't get to use the blocker skill on him, and because this deck is a mill deck, you want to be a lot more defensive generally. So because you don't get the use out of the blocker skill and the attack like you would with the Haze, this card is just a lot worse. If he simply switched to active mode at the end of the turn, he'd be really, really good. But sadly he doesn't. But what's nice about him is he offers some decent removal, not quite as good as the 3-drop Haze, but he can take stuff out of the drop area and he can help you apply a bit more pressure. And if your opponent has a barrier card in their drop area, you can steal it and he can become a barrier blocker, which isn't too bad. For some more of the 3-drops, this card you're generally not playing off of your Haze Shenron, because he has his own way of playing him and it's better. But this is 3 copies of the Syn Shenron Power of Darkness. So he's 20k double strike, which is nice for applying pressure. You would be surprised at how much this deck can apply pressure, because a lot of the time you're able to just kill your opponent rather than having to mill them out. But he also offers acceleration in the mill game plan in his auto. So he has an auto, limit 1 for 1 specified black. If your leader is a black Shadow Dragon card, when you remove a marker from one of your unisons using a Spirit Boost skill, play this card from your hand and then your opponent mills 1. So that's really nice in conjunction with your leader, because your leader means that you always have a Spirit Boost ability that you can actually trigger. As long as you have your unison down, you can just drop this guy for 1 energy, your opponent mills 1, and then he's a 20k double strike. And then he of course has the same auto as all of the Shadow Dragons, so does Naturon. I didn't mention that, but I kind of don't need to. He has the same auto as the Shadow Dragons, where if he's played or discarded, you check the top card. So even if you're just dropping him for the mill 1, he's not gonna impact your hand advantage at all, because he'll replace himself hopefully. For some of the other Shadow Dragon stuff that I'm running, we have 3 of the Naturon Shenron Power of Darkness. He's the 1-drop Naturon. He's okay. He has a slightly different on-play auto. So if his auto that is like akin to all of the other Shadow Dragons, where if he's played or discarded, it doesn't trigger on play, which is really, really frustrating. It only triggers by discard, where you get to check the top card. And that's my main issue with this card. If it had its auto trigger on play as well, it would be a lot better. But it has a separate on play auto where when it's played, you get to add one of your Shadow Dragon extra cards from your drop area to your hand. So a lot of the time when you hit late game, you want to be dropping this guy to recycle some of your extra cards. Or if you really, really need an extra card in the early turns, you can drop him to just grab it back. But he's kind of not great, and I find myself charging or discarding him a lot. The issue with this deck currently, because we don't have that many Shadow Dragons, is you have to run some of the subpar ones like this Naturon one, and like a card that I'm going to cover just now as well. You just have to run them just for extra names, and I could even see myself cutting down the 3-drop Syn Shenron in the future if better cards get released to us. but you just have to run them as names so that your deck is really consistent with the Shadow Dragon autos that are triggering every time you discard. So onto another slightly lackluster Shadow Dragon. We have 2 of the promo. I don't think I've ever played this card and used his Spirit Boost effect. So he's really not that great. You just charge him or discard him most of the time. But the reason I'm running him is he's a 1-drop. So if you're in a really tight spot and you just need to search for a specific Shadow Dragon, you can pay 1 and just play him and check the top card. And he has exactly the same Spirit Boost effect as your backside leader does. So it's not too bad if you want to be like, you could play this guy and then use the Spirit Boost to play an extra card if you need to. It's not too bad if you're looking to mill your opponent out in 1 turn. And he provides you with some kind of decent defense because it allows you 2 Spirit Boosts in your opponent's turn. But oftentimes your Unison doesn't get that many markers for you to be Spirit Boosting twice a turn. Especially when you consider that you're going to be Spirit Boosting in your turn and your opponent's turn. So it can be quite hard to manage the number of markers on your Unison. And so this card just isn't that crazy, and I think I'll probably cut him when more stuff gets announced. But for now, we just need some Shadow Dragon names in there. Probably the best card in the deck, or definitely one of the best, is going to be 4 of the Oceana Shenron. This card is really insane. It's a 5k blocker. It has a permanent where it's reduced to a 2 cost during your opponent's turn. It has a counter attack where you discard a card from your hand, play this card, and then negate the attack, and your opponent can't attack for the turn unless they mill 4 cards every time. So if your opponent is even swinging once and milling 4, that's going to put them so much closer to death with this deck, because once you hit late game and you're Spirit Boosting and just playing a bunch of extra cards with all your energy, your opponent is going to be milling like 5 or 6 cards a turn, which is really insane. So this mill 4 is really impactful, and most of the times it just stops a turn. Then she obviously has the same auto as all of the other Shadow Dragons. So something that's important, a couple of things important to note here. First of all, she negates the attack initially, and she plays herself as a blocker, which is really insane. So even if your opponent is swinging for the kill that turn and they're swinging through the mill 4, you're able to stop 2 attacks for 2 energy, which is really good for this deck. Secondly, when you discard, it will trigger your Shadow Dragon autos on discard, and when she's played, it will trigger her auto. So you're actually, even though it looks like you're losing 2 cards from your hand, you're getting them both back as long as you hit Shadow Dragons off the top. And I have a decent amount of Shadow Dragons in this deck that you probably will hit them off most of the time. Finally, the last thing to note about this card is that she still negates the attack if she gets counterplayed, but she doesn't trigger the mill 4 every time, because you have to play this card for that to trigger. And she also won't get her on play auto, obviously. So if this card gets counterplayed, you're kind of screwed. And that's the current issue that I have with this deck, is it feels like a lot of the deck is not that great, but this card carries it. And if this card gets counterplayed, you kind of just lose most of the time. For our super combos, I'm running 4 of the Oceana Shenron. This is just a simple, if you're sparking 5, she gains 10k power, and then you draw a card. The reason I'm running the Oceana Shenron one is because it's a Shadow Dragon, so you can search it off all of your Shadow Dragon skills, and having Shadow Dragon names is really important. Also, the second effect where you can slide her under a Unison when you activate Spirit Boost to draw 1 and replace a marker can come up sometimes if you're looking to like Spirit Boost multiple times, or if your opponent is swinging down a Unison and you block and maybe Spirit Boost an extra card away, stuff like that. That's all of the Black Shadow Dragons that I'm running at the moment. In the Fight Night event, I was actually running 1 copy of the 4-drop Syn Shenron, but I've since taken him out. I think this card is really overrated. People were hyping this card a lot, and I really don't think it's that good, because you have to pay 4 for it initially, which is very expensive for a deflect double strike barrier blocker. His keywords are really strong, definitely. And he has the Spirit Boost, which can switch into active mode whenever you use it. Most of the time I just found myself charging him though whenever I was playing him, because tapping 4 in this deck is massively expensive, because you either want to be leaving 2 energy up for your Oceanus, or you want to be leaving some amount of energy up for some of your extra cards in hand. And whilst he does provide you with that spirit boost, like I mentioned earlier, you're not going to have that many markers on your Unison, because you're spirit boosting so often in this deck, like probably once every turn, or twice every turn, because you can do it during your turn and your opponent's turn. You're just going to be spirit boosting too much for you to tap 4 for this card, I think. And against aggro decks, if you tap 4 for this card, you're probably just going to die, because yes, he provides you a blocker and he provides you another free play extra card, but against aggro decks you want to be Oceanusing them every single turn if you can. You want to be using that negate, and you want to be using your extra cards as defense tools after they swing through that negate. So this card is not great against aggro. It's okay against control, because it can provide you with 2 double strike swings, but against control you're kind of already going to be winning anyway, because you can mill them out faster than they can kill you most times. And so you don't want to be maining cards for already winning matchups. You want to be playing towards your losing matchups so that you have a much more even matchup spread. So I was playing this as a one-off during the fight night, but I took it out in the end. I just don't think it's that good anymore. So for some of the non-Shadow Dragon cards, I'm running 3 Haze Shenron of the yellow variant. This card is really, really good in the deck, but I've kind of flip-flopped between this and 3 copies of Power Burst. And I was running 3 Power Burst during the fight night. That was only because I'd lent these out to somebody and I don't have any copies other than these. But the Haze Shenron is really nice. The Power Burst is also really nice if you want to be running that instead, because it recycles your 1-drops and you can use it to take life and protect your Unison a little bit more. But Haze Shenron is really good because when you discard the card, it doesn't have to be a yellow Shadow Dragon that you discard, and it also doesn't have to be a battle card, so you can discard your extra cards with this card if you need to. But when you discard a black Shadow Dragon battle card, it would actually trigger the auto of the cards, because they don't have to be discarded by a black Shadow Dragon skill, they just have to be discarded by a Shadow Dragon skill. However, this card is not searchable from those set effects, because those only search black Shadow Dragons. But this card is obviously really good. Something else that's important to note is you cannot evolve this on your 3-drop Haze Shenron, because it's a Haze Shenron Xeno. So that's something that I thought was a thing for a while. I never actually went and did it, but I thought it was a thing for a while, and just to let you know, you can't do that. We also have 2 Brainwash No More. I could definitely see myself getting rid of these and going with 2 Power Bursts instead, and then keeping the 3 Hazes in. But currently I'm running just 2 Brainwash No More, mostly just because people don't normally expect it, and also because if you're power bursting, you're negating the attack, which means you can't go to combo step, and during combo step is when you can activate a lot of your extra cards. So if your opponent is going in for like their final kill swing with like a double strike or a triple strike, you can just burn through all of your extra cards that you can, so that you can get maximum mills and maximum advantage during your opponent's turn, and then you can trigger this guy to save yourself at the last step of the combo. So that's the main reason I'm running him over Power Burst at the moment. Plus, the Overwhelm effect, where you just drop him as a 30k, can come in really nicely sometimes. But you can run Power Burst over him if you don't own him. He's not incredibly good, and I could definitely see myself taking him out. For the secret rare, I'm running 1 Black Smoke. This card, don't run this card in the deck. It's not good. If you have the Syn Xeno secret rare, run that instead. I don't have it at the moment. I'm going to get it because I love this deck. It's so much fun. Don't run this card. This card is really, really bad in the deck. I think that honestly, a card like Heroine's Lineage or a card like the Supreme Kai of Time secret rare might be better than this card. So it's really not that good. Like, I really wouldn't recommend running it. You would think in a mill deck it would be good, but you're tapping 5 to play this, and it doesn't have protection first off. You're tapping 5 to play this and mill 7 from their deck, right? most of the time, if you're tapping 5 out, that means you can play 5 extra cards, which is a mill 5. And most of the time, the difference between 5 and 7 mills in this deck really doesn't matter, because you're going to be milling them out very quickly anyway. And the difference between 5 and 7 is, especially once you get to like turn 5 or turn 6, it probably won't make a difference, because you can always spirit boost in more extra cards. If your opponent is going to be swinging at your leader, you're going to be playing more extra cards from your hand, because they all have activate battle skills. The mill 7 just never comes up, because you can play extra cards and achieve almost exactly the same result, while still gaining you more advantage from the extra cards themselves. And like, it's just not good. Don't run Black Smoke, it's not good. This actual Syn secret rare offers you a lot more protection, and it's searchable because it's considered a Black Shadow Dragon. Anyway, enough about that. I'm just sad because I don't own the secret rare. For the actual Shadow Dragon extra cards, I haven't covered any of these yet, but we're running quite a few because they're really, really strong for what they are. Because you can play them all for free off of your leader skill and off of some of your battle card spirit boosts. This guy is the only 2-cost one that we have at the moment. All of them have the permanent where they gain Shadow Dragon in all areas, which makes them searchable off of your battle cards. None of them have the same auto as your battle cards. That's only the battle cards. But this one, they all have limit 1 to their activate main/battle skills. And this one is activate main/battle. If your opponent has a unison card in play, your opponent mills 1 from the extra card, and then they either choose to remove 2 markers from their unison, or you draw a card and then you get to choose one of their battle cards and warp it. This card, I've been thinking of upping this to 3, honestly, because a lot of decks are playing unisons at the moment, and it's really, really strong. Especially when you just play it for free. Most of the times this is going to be the extra card you drop for free off of your leader. It's just really good, because most of the time they're letting you draw a card and they're letting you warp one of their battle cards, and they're going to be milling 2 because they'll mill 1 off this and 1 off this. The only reason I haven't upped it to 3 already is because it requires your opponent to have a unison in play for you to actually activate the card. And because there are a lot of decks like King Vegeta and Dark Broly running the meta at the moment, they don't play unisons, and so this card is kind of useless against them, because you just can't activate it. For a best of 3 tournament, I would actually recommend siding some of the other extra cards and some of this, just in case you want to be like siding this out, but you still want to keep your Shadow Dragon extra cards high, because you want to be searching them a lot. So maybe consider that for a best of 3 event. I didn't play best of 3 with this, I played best of 1, because you play 1 game with the deck and then you switch out. So I didn't have to do that. For the other extra cards, we have 3 of the Negative Energy Explosion. Just as a side note as well, I'm not running 4 of any of the extra cards yet, because they're all limit 1, and because they're all you can recycle them all off of the Toa, and they're all searchable off of your Shadow Dragon skills. So you really don't need more than 3 for any of the extra cards at the moment. Except for maybe this card, because this card is probably one of the best extra cards. Because it's very simple. You just play it, and then you check the top 7 cards of your deck, and you either add a Shadow Dragon extra card among them to your hand. You can add copies of itself, but because it's limit 1, I wouldn't recommend doing that most of the time. The other effect is, if you don't have a unison card in play, and you see one of your Toas in the top 7, you can just play it with a marker on it. So this card is really incredible, because it means you're effectively running 7 copies of your unison on turn 1, because if you mulligan, full mulligan, and don't see a unison, but you see this card, chances are you're going to check the top 7 and see a unison there. And even if you don't, you get your extra card to hand, so you're not losing anything even if you whiff on the unison search. But this card is really good. The only downside to it is that it's limit 1, and that's the only reason I've got it at 3 rather than 4. I would have it at 4 if it wasn't limit 1, and I still would consider upping it to 4, honestly. The other searcher extra card we have is the Ultimate Whirlwind Spin. This is a limit 1, you check the top 5 this time for a Black Shadow Dragon battle card. So this is your extra card and unison card searcher, and this is your battle card searcher. This one has an additional effect, which is lovely. which is after the top 5 search has resolved, you have the option to discard a Shadow Dragon card, and then your leader gains plus 1k for the turn. So it's effectively going to be a bean against most decks, because your opponent will have to combo up to 20k on the backside to actually get through to your leader, which is really nice. And the discard will trigger your Shadow Dragon battle card autos. So even if it's your turn and you're activating this card just for the search, sometimes you want to be discarding Shadow Dragons just to search the top card, because you need like a specific Shadow Dragon for your opponent's next turn. Or if you're looking to mill them out and you want to grab your extra cards, you can ditch your battle cards to search the top card for your extra cards, and then try and mill them out faster. We also have 3 of the Haze extra card, the Ultimate Dragon Quake. This card is lovely, and it's effectively exactly the same as your 4-drop Haze Shenron, which is another reason why I'd consider cutting the 4-drop Haze Shenron, because this card does the same thing. You could maybe cut this card to 2 and run 3 of the 4-drop Haze, or you could just cut the 4-drop Haze and run 3 of this. I'm testing 3 and 3 at the moment, and it's working okay, but I might add a card like Power Burst in instead of the Haze, or just some more Shadow Dragon cards, I don't know yet. But this is activate main / battle like all of the rest. You choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards with an energy cost greater than their current energy and send it to the warp. And then it's very similar to the Kai Negate in that it plays the battle card at the end of the turn with its skills negated, so the on-play autos and stuff don't trigger. But it also has the additional text of, if your opponent is on 15 or fewer cards in their deck, the card that you sent to the warp gets placed in the drop area at the end of the turn instead of being played, which is really nice because it's just hard removal if your opponent is at 15 or less cards. And because it's a mill deck, we're going to be getting to 15 or less cards pretty quickly. For the final cards in the deck, I have 3 of the Ultimate Dark Dragon Slaying Bullet. I was running 2 of this during the fight night, I just hadn't had my 3rd one arrive yet. I would still consider cutting this card down to 2, but because it's, or for a best of 1, I would definitely run 3, because it's really good against decks that rely on unisons, and there's a lot more of those with set 14 around. So it has a counterplay. The counterplay effect is not limit 1, only the activate main / battle effect is limit 1, but you cannot trigger the counterplay effect off of your leader spirit boosts or any of your spirit boosts, so that's important to note. But the counterplay is only if your opponent is playing a unison. They either remove a marker from it for every 2 cards in their drop area, and their warp. So there's going to be quite a few of those because you're a mill deck. Once it gets past like turn 2 or turn 3, you're going to be effectively killing their unison with this counterplay every time. So they can either do that, or they can only attack once more for that turn, which is insanely strong. So if you think your opponent's going to be playing a unison during their next turn, you just hold 1 energy open, and then you drop this as soon as you can on their unison, because you're either saving yourself some damage or you're going to be killing off their unison, and most of the times that'll just be their entire turn for that turn. Then the activate main / battle is limit 1 like all of the others. It's also got some really nice utility in that your opponent chooses one of their battle cards with an energy cost less than the number of cards in their drop area and sends it to the warp. So that's really nice. It doesn't come up all that often. Most of the time it's only useful against decks that might play like 1 or 2 battle cards and go really tall rather than really wide. Or if you're just able to remove a lot of their stuff, then you can drop it and force them to remove out their last couple of cards. So it's not too bad. The main reason you want to be running this card is for the counterplay skill, just because the counterplay skill offers a lot of impact against a lot of decks. But the reason that you run 3 of this card is so that you always have the counterplay available to you when you think your opponent will drop a unison, and because it has the extra utility of being some battle card removal as well if you want it to. So that's the deck profile, guys. I think I went over all of the changes that I've made between Fight Night and now, but I was running 3 Power Burst and 1 of the 4-drop Syns, instead of 1 of the Ultimate Dark Dragon Slaying Bullets and 3 of the Haze Shenrons. I really enjoy this deck. I recommend picking it up now because they're definitely going to release a lot more support for it over the next 2 sets. Like, I reckon the number of cards that we have currently for the deck will probably double in 2 sets time because we still have 4 Shadow Dragons to see in their Xeno forms. But if you're interested in mill decks, I would definitely recommend picking this up. It's really, really fun. It's really skill intensive. There's a lot of different micro decisions that you have to make that really, really impact how you might play this deck. But it's really, really good fun. If you're looking for something a bit more challenging, and if you're looking for a really interesting mill deck, I definitely recommend picking it up. For me, the main attractions to it are obviously it's a Syn Shenron deck, it's a mill deck, and the fact that it's quite tricky to play is very good for me as well because I always enjoy a challenge when it comes to playing Dragon Ball. So definitely pick it up. If you're interested in checking out like my Facebook page or my Twitch channel or anything, I'll have links to those in the description along with my last couple of deck profiles that I played for Fight Night. So check out all of the stuff in the description. Like and subscribe and all of that, and I hope you have a good one.